Hi everyone, welcome. Thank you so kindly for joining us. Welcome to Green Apple Books on the Park. My name is Cara Johnson. I'm the event coordinator for Green Apple. And tonight, I'm very excited to welcome Inci Atrek to celebrate her debut novel, Holiday Country. Let's give a hand. She is joined tonight by Green Apple favorite and fellow Flatiron Books author Nina LaCour. Let's give a hand for Nina as well.
Yeah, Nina!
And thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you for joining us both here in person and online. Hello, online audience. We appreciate you. We're broadcasting from San Francisco. We are on unceded Ramaytush Ohlone land, and we hope that you join us in our pledge to turn land acknowledgement into action by donating either your time or monetary means to an Indigenous organization each time you hear a land acknowledgement. I have very brief business before we get to the heart of the evening. Now's a good time to silence your phones if you have not already. I would say the picture taking is encouraged, but run that by our authors, I guess. But I would say, yes, go for it, please do. Please do check out our full event calendar online at greenapplebooks.com/event. We have a really great season ahead of us. This is our second event of 2024, so we're starting out pretty strong. We got it going on this year. I can feel it because we're already here already, and it's going great. So you might like what else we have to come in the season. The restroom is behind us. It is available after the event and not during the event for obvious reasons. If you need to know how to get there, just let me know. I'm happy to show you. We have books from both of our authors available at the front register. You can find them there. If you've been here before, you've heard me say that when you buy books from us, not only do you support us as an independent bookstore, but you support the authors who put so much work into making these books, and then you get to have a book, which might be the best part. So if you're able, we always appreciate it. And I think I am making an assumption that they'll sign books afterward, but yeah, they will. So that's pretty special too. Consider it. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the two authors who are joining us this evening. First, Nina LaCour is the Michael L. Prince award-winning and nationally best-selling author of Watch Over Me, We Are Okay, Hold Still, and Everything Leads to You. She hosts the podcast Keeping a Notebook and teaches for Hamline University's MFA program, in writing for children and young adult books. She's a former bookseller and high school English teacher, and she lives with her family here in San Francisco. Her latest novel is Yerba Buena. Let's give another hand for Nina. And last but most certainly, not least, Inci Atrek holds a BA in English and Creative Writing from Wellesley College. We are very glad to welcome her back to San Francisco. Welcome back. And her first novel, Holiday Country, is the reason we are here tonight. Please give another hand for Inci Atrek.
Okay, this is working.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. All right. I'm so excited to be here to celebrate your debut. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah. The book came out yesterday. Yes. And I can see that there are a lot of friends in the audience, so this feels like a very special event. And I'm so excited to talk to you about Holiday Country. So, let's see. I thought we might begin with your journey to this moment. We spoke briefly about how you have lived in many places, and it seems have had some other careers before writing. And so, tell us your journey from maybe either conceptualizing this novel or when you knew that you wanted to write up until now.
Yeah. So I grew up in the Bay Area, but I spent 3 months out of every year spending summer in Turkey in Ayvalık, where Holiday Country takes place. And I always knew that I wanted to be a writer, and I always knew that my first big project would be about Turkey. So I studied English and creative writing in undergrad, and then I had this idea that I would be a literature professor and I would write on the side. But when I was in my senior year, I was like, oh my God, I can't do 7 more years of school. Like I'm going to start working. So I did corporate for a while. And still writing in the mornings and the evenings. That's when I that's when I started this novel, or my first attempt at a novel. I did my MBA, I came back, I rewrote the novel from scratch, and yeah, 10 years after I started, here it is, so.
Oh, that's wonderful. I love it when our initial ideas of what we want to do don't quite end up being the thing that we pick, and then we take a more circuitous route. Yeah. So I know that you had a section that you wanted to read. So open with.
Yeah. So I know the book just came out yesterday, so a lot of people haven't had a chance to read it. But very quick plot summary. The book is about a 19-year-old Turkish Californian girl. She spends her summers in Turkey visiting her grandmother. And one summer when she's 19, she runs into this mysterious man from her mother's past, and she starts to become romantically obsessed with him. So the passage that I want to read, if I can find it, is the mother, grandmother, and daughter are walking out. They're all dressed for dinner. There's one small restaurant in their summer town. And there's a drowning that happens at the seaside. Just give me a second to find the right passage. Okay, here we go. So there's a drowning that happens, and this man from her mother's past saves this woman, Emine, and the man's name is Levant. Let's see if I can get this mic off here. Okay. All right, so they're there at the beach, and they see the woman being saved. Emine, my grandmother gasps. Then she squints. Is that Levant? My mother doesn't adjust her gaze. She's already seen him. Yes, that's Levant, she nods. He's the one who saved her. A hero, my grandmother says. I recognize the man with the shark-tooth necklace. I can see the leather string around his neck as he turns toward the showers, seawater dripping from his orange swim trunks. I say to my mother, look, it's your friend. Friend, she repeats sharply, as if correcting me. My grandmother grabs my mother, who in turn grabs me, and we scurry to the showers. A few people are coming by and congratulating Levant as he rinses off, but most of the people and attention are focused on Emine. She sits on a sunbed, coddled in a towel and surrounded by waiters and neighbors. The family together, Levant says, giving a nod to each of us. He reaches for a striped cloth towel from the towel rack, holds it for a minute, then slings it around his neck. I don't know why he doesn't dry himself. There's water everywhere. His orange swim trunks cling to his thighs, translucent where they touch the skin. Water drips from the curled edges of his long black hair, from his eyelashes. I track one slipping down his cheek, falling, then sinking into the waistband of his trunks. It is different, seeing someone so naked in the evening, especially when I am properly dressed. Levant's towels a pishtamal, in vogue the last several years for their lightweight and absorbency. Us, we have too many towels collected over past summers to switch to anything new. The ones we drape around our shoulders are always heavy with water or hardened by the sun. Yes, all of us together, our little family. It doesn't happen often, says my grandmother. Her face is bright and her pearl pink lipstick shines. A drop of water hesitates on the very edge of Levant's hooked nose. I have a sudden urge to place my hand underneath and capture it before the fall, to walk around with that droplet on my fingertip, protecting it. I imagine it holds a secret to his great adaptability, his audacity to already start saving us from ourselves when he has just arrived in town. The droplet drips, then disappears onto the stone between his feet. I gasp. Ada? My grandmother raises her eyebrows at me. She cannot stand when I act inappropriately in front of mixed company. Is everything all right with you? I nod, unsure of what's come over me. Ada I had the pleasure of meeting only recently, says Levant. He smiles at me without showing his teeth. Then he opens up into a grin, a line of small yellowed squares. Her Turkish is very good. Meltem, you've done an excellent job. I know my Turkish isn't as good as it should be, and I know that you would never compliment someone on something that seems to come naturally to them. I want to say something in Turkish now, a sentence I've spoken over and over again that has developed the fluency of a local, but nothing comes to mind. I remain mute. My grandmother leaps in, sweeping away the attention. Meltem has never forgotten her roots, of course, but you, how are we standing here talking about something other than the fact that you saved a woman's life today? Oh, the event has messed with our minds. You are a hero, Levant. Without invitation, she steps over and kisses him on his wet cheeks. When she retreats, Levant looks embarrassed. Emine, my grandmother remembers, and rushes over to see her friend. My mother follows her, but I stay where I am. Levant lifts the end of the peshtamal up to his face and gives it a cursory wipe. Ada, do you spend much time in Istanbul? He asks. Sure, I say. We fly into the city and stay on the avenue. The avenue. He pauses to consider this. Then he shuts his eyes so tightly his upper lip lifts, as if thinking of something he shouldn't. He opens them again. Do you ever go to the European side? Do you know it well? Yes. The lie surprises me. My mother and I almost never cross over, but I don't want him to know this. I don't want him to know that if I go to the European side and I'm no longer on the avenue, which runs parallel to the Sea of Marmara, then I won't know how to get to the water. To be lost in that way is embarrassing in this country. The European side is the best side, full of history, he says. The other side, there's not that much there. No, I agree, there isn't. I'm suddenly very aware of my hands. I place them on top of my head, a daytime habit for when I want to assess the strength of the sun. My hair is cool from the evening and silken from the conditioner, and everything feels wrong. I drop my arms back to my sides, trying to act natural. You belong on the European side, he says. A girl like you would turn that place inside out. You would wreck that city. Do you know what I mean? As we say, Istanbul, cauldron, you, ladle. Cihangir, Çukurcuma, Bebek. All those neighborhoods are filled with girls like you, color and laughter and energy. It's a pity you don't spend more time there. We have to see my grandmother, I say. She moves down here in May and she misses us too much. Spoken out loud does not sound like a good enough reason. Levant's expression, one raised eyebrow, reflects my own thoughts. Not good enough, Ada. His face is an echo, an amplification of my insufficient excuses. I look down at my feet and tell him that I should probably go check on Emine.
What a wonderful passage to choose. And, all the different dynamics among the characters are so great, and the glimpse of the village. And so I know that you grew up going to Turkey, to a small village for 3 months out of the year. Will you tell us about those trips and what it meant to you in your life?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I absolutely loved my time there. We were really lucky. My grandmother has a house just right by the sea, and I think it was, because it was a very small community, it felt incredibly safe. And whereas when I was in the U.S., you're in the suburbs, and if you can't drive, you can't really go out, you can't do anything. But there, I would always be out of the house, wouldn't have to tell anyone where I was. I would be out till 2, 3 in the morning with my friends. And, wherever you go, you run into someone you know. And just that sense of, freedom and everyone kind of knowing who you are was really, really special to me. And every time I came back, I'd always try to tell my friends about it and just do my best to explain, I really need you to understand what this experience is like, because it's so incredibly special.
Yeah. Did you feel like it was possible to convey how special it was?
I felt like I had to try no matter what. Yeah. So it wasn't, the question wasn't, can I do it, can I not do it? It's just, okay, well, this is what I have to do, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I asked because I got the sense reading that Ada is so kind of split, it feels, between this, it feels, the feeling that I got was that she wished that she could have a whole life in Turkey and a whole life in California, maybe, I don't know, but the idea of having kind of one set of people who know you in one way and then another set who know you in an entirely different way really struck me as, kind of core to who she was and her struggles in a way, and gifts as well.
Yeah, I mean, definitely it's a story that has a lot to do with belonging to a place and identity. And I think one thing that's also really central to the novel is mother-daughter dynamics, because Ada's mother grew up in Turkey, and she came to America when she got married. And so Ada sees her mother as this woman who's never really been able to just get a foothold in America. She can't express herself properly in English. She forgets all the brand names. She gets lost on the street. But the thing is, when her mother goes back to Turkey for the summers with her, that country has changed in her absence. And so, the currency has changed, or the way of speaking has changed. New places have opened up. Like the cinemas where she used to go to are torn down now. And so when her mother comes back to the country that's supposed to be her home, that's not home either. And the sense of homelessness is very terrifying to Ada, that she sees in her mother. So I think that his feeling of being split is also amplified by I need to latch on to something because I don't want to end up like her.
Mm-hmm. Will you tell us about both? So I want to ask about names now. So the title of the book, How You Came to Holiday Country, and then also the names of the characters and if there are any stories or significance behind them.
Yeah, so I actually had a few not so great titles before I came to this one, which I'm super happy with, but I lived in London for a while where they say holiday, where Americans would say vacation, like, oh, I'm going on holiday, and I just thought that made it so festive. And holiday country, the term first comes up in the book when the characters are at the Republic Day ball, so to celebrate in Turkey becoming a republic, a big ball in California for the community. And there's one woman that says, these kids, they don't really know the real Turkey. It's just holiday country for them. All they know are its beaches, and that's just a very, very small slice of that life. And so that's kind of what Ada's struggling with throughout the book is what does it take? I love this place, but what does it take to really call it home if all I see is this, not even just the summer, but this tiny, tiny community with just these people. It's so easy to navigate. And the names I think some names are explained in the book. In Turkish, a lot of names are also words. So Ada is the Turkish word for island. Islands are very central to the book. You can see her kind of swimming to some islands on the cover. Meltem is a Turkish word kind of meaning breeze because she sees her mother as someone who's just taken by the wind, doesn't have agency. Mukaddar, the grandmother, her name's about fate. And there's one character in here that I actually named after someone I knew that I would like to mention tonight. So when I first started writing this novel, it was actually not like this at all. It was still a mother-daughter story, but it took place in Istanbul, and part of it took place in the past, in the 1970s. And I was trying to research, I was trying to figure out what was life like back then, and I ended up scrapping the manuscript. I did work about 4 or 5 years on it. And, people would tell me, oh, don't write about a time that you don't know about. But there was this one family friend who took me seriously, and I think she was the first one in my community to take me seriously, and she came to my office and let me interview her. So I named one of the characters Dilek after her. So it was, it's not that when you name characters after people, they're not at all reflective of them, but it's nice, I think, to include kind of little clues from your real life.
Absolutely. That's such a special story. Thank you for sharing that. It makes me curious about what your writing process is like now, hearing that you worked on a manuscript for 4 or 5 years and scrapped it and started over is certainly familiar to me. And I'm wondering how do you work? Do you have a group of readers who you share work with? What is your writing life like?
I'm a very, very slow writer. So I don't have a plot. I just write, and I write everything that's not the story I want to tell, and just hundreds and hundreds of pages that don't make sense, don't follow each other, and I force myself to read them, and I go through and what sounds like an authentic idea, what really rings true here that I can build a story out of. And it's so frustrating to work that way. It's so frustrating because then you take that and then you don't have a plot. But I think that when I have an idea I want to explore, I really stick with it until the end, because the reason that I have this idea in the first place is because there's some kind of emotion in myself that I'm trying to work out, or some confusion that I can't really figure out anymore, so I just make up some characters and have them figure it out for me. So I feel like there's a lot at stake to get that story right. And I do have a few, I don't have like a writer's group or anything, but I have a few like very enthusiastic friends who kind of read my early drafts and give honest feedback. It's not easy to read a draft. I think some people get like, very excited, and then they read it and they're like, oh, this needs work. Like, I can't do this. But I'm very lucky to have some people who kind of slog through that for me.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Okay, would you be open to reading a little bit more?
Yeah,
I would love to have you read the first page, just up until the first line on page 2, to show us all, how the book opens and.
Chapter 1, The Small Club. A man stands at the top of the ladder, blocking my way out from the sea. You must be Maltam's daughter, he says. He places a hand on each side rail and leans in toward me. In fact, I'm sure of it. I can tell by the way you swim. It's mid-July, and even though I've never seen this man before, I can tell that he spent long days in places of summer. His irises are too bright for such naturally dark features. His beard is coarse with salt, and his unkempt hair curls under his ears and traces, just for a moment, his jawline. Around his neck is a shark tooth on a leather string, an interesting choice of accessory, a child's accessory, for someone my father's age. It's one of the many things that I still haven't gotten used to around here. In this country, especially in this small town, all collisions are considered an invitation to conversation. Instead of getting easier over the years, like I thought it might, masking my irritation has only gotten harder. I climb out and motion for him to step aside, joining him on the dock. Then I gather up the 2 triangles of my bikini, give them a tug, and squeeze. A small rain empties out onto the wooden planks. Yes, I confirm, feeling his gaze on me. Maltam's my mother.
I feel that this passage starts the book off with, so many dynamics that are continued to be explored throughout the novel. And one is this, the contrast between youth and age, and Ada and her mother, who is aging, and Ada's 19, and, I want to know, maybe I'll interrupt myself and ask you, why did you choose the age 19? Because I thought it was such a wonderful choice for the book.
Oh, yeah. I wanted her to be in college. I want her to still be a student. Because in this, something that comes up in this book is that, she's getting used to spending every summer here. But then after, in mid-college, you start having internships. You start thinking about jobs. And you don't get to have those 3 months of just life on the beach anymore. So there's kind of like, is this the last summer that I can have this freedom, that I can be in this place, and what has this place meant to me? And I know it is someone who has she does pursue this older man, and I wanted it to be an age where, she wasn't too young, and it was a character where you think like, okay, like, this woman is making bad decisions, but she's making her own decisions.
Yeah, definitely. Yes, it sets her right there really well. And, just meeting him and seeing the shark's tooth, which is like a child, but for someone could be her father's age, I think really, continues to work with that contrast in a very interesting way. And it also feels dangerous and, like childlike, but also potentially dangerous. And I also I wanted to know more about, one of the things I felt most drawn to was Ada's relationship with her mother. And maybe you could speak a little bit about how Ada sees her mother, at least in the beginning of the novel.
Yeah, so this novel is told all from Ada's perspective. And so the way she sees her mother, it's a relationship that is probably the thing I worked on the most in the book, because I wanted the relationship to have many layers, but still be clear for the reader. So that was one of the biggest challenges. But yeah, like I mentioned, she sees her mother as kind of someone who's lost, who doesn't really belong here nor there. And also, from her name, Maltam, she doesn't have that much agency. Her grandmother is a very, very dominant character and makes all the choices for Maltam, and Maltam has kind of gotten used to just thinking of okay, whatever mother says, that's the law, that's what we're going to do. And Ada sees her mother as someone who's kind of very helpless. There's an incredible amount of love in that relationship from both sides, but she thinks her mother made some mistakes in her past that need fixing, and she kind of takes it upon herself to fix those mistakes.
Mm-hmm. I think this is a perfect time to read that the fish scene, the restaurant scene, because it shows the dynamic among the three of them so well. So let's see. That one is on page 28.
Can I read from your copy?
Of course, sure. Go.
Okay, that's one more section. So this is when I think, yes, they're on the terrace of their summer house eating fish. This fish hasn't been deboned, I say, pointing at it with my knife. My mother doesn't seem to hear me. Her gaze is out toward the small club, but her eyes are clouded over, the haze blocking what's directly in front of her. Mom, I repeat, the fish. What? She glances at my plate, at the detritus of an ineffective surgery. Oh, but honey, you don't know how? See, this is exactly what I've been telling you, my grandmother says. Everyone born and raised along the coast knows the proper way to debone a fish, don't they? And yet look at your daughter. Where you live now, does it even matter that you live by the water? Everything in America is handed to you from elsewhere. You don't know where it comes from. The connection is severed. My mother nods and motions for me to pass along my plate, but my grandmother shoves her arm back down. Others should learn, she says, but I can do it so much fast. Leave it, madame. Make an ugly face at my grandmother. She gasps in mock shock, then laughs, acting as if this is all in good fun. My mother drifts back into her reverie, shifting her focus from time to time to check whether I am struggling. I want to ask her about the man, but I don't want to reveal our meeting earlier that day, so I stay quiet. I wonder if she's thinking about him, about how he couldn't recognize her. From across the table, she mimes how, with my knife, I should lift the skeleton clean from the body. I concentrate on the extraction, but listen in as my grandmother attempts to defend my cultural ineptitude. Our community in California tries to make sure that the kids retain Turkish values, she says. My grandmother cackles. She asks my mother to please elaborate, then settles into a more comfortable position on her chair, as if preparing to watch a film.
It's so, I feel like it's so familiar, this dynamic, you know, in so many different ways of the three of them, and they're all like very much themselves, and they're trying to, you know, connect or call each other out on different things. And I just think that you were able to portray a really real feeling familial relationship that is so complex.
Yeah. Thank you. The scenes where I have the three of them were my favorite to write. Yeah, especially the grandmother. She was my absolute favorite.
Yeah. Is she inspired by somebody?
Well, I mean, it was my grandmother's house that I went to, but for my first manuscript that I worked on, so not this one, I really took a lot from my own life, and because I felt like my life is so interesting, the people are so interesting, and everyone's inspired by someone, it's going to be great. It was so incredibly boring, and it didn't work for the story, and then people hated the main character, which was me, and I was like, unlike. And so I think in order to make a good story, you can kind of take like dynamics that you see, like an interaction in your family. You say, oh, in this interaction, this person has this type of character, and this person has like a weaker character, and then you kind of build from there, even though maybe that's just like a single part of their personality. But in order to kind of create the emotional state that I wanted, and like create the story that I wanted, I really had to start from scratch. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people I know in each of the characters, a lot of me in all of the characters, but in order to make the story work, you have to blow up, exaggerate, mix and match, create whole new people.
Yeah. I also, just to touch once more on the intergenerational aspect of the story and the age, there's something really interesting about thinking of this village that Ada visits every year, and people growing older, you know, each time she goes, and then seeing like there are these kind of pre-teens who are kind of tough and confident, and then these like very old people going down to the beach, and it's just a lovely view of like a very specific place.
Yeah, I love, there are these like cool preteen girls who make fun of Abba because she can't sing the right words, and I love writing them too. But I also think that one really important thing about this town being intergenerational, it's kind of one of the like sleepier Turkish towns. You know, you wouldn't like go there with your friends to party over the summer. You'd go visit your grandmother because you have multiple generations living in a home. Whatever you do, and everyone sees what you do. Whatever you do is not just reflected on you, it's reflected on your family. And so this makes kind of any decision have like enormous consequences. So I like that about having, you know, everyone in there as well.
Yeah, I also love how gossip works in the book. Maybe you could speak a little bit about that.
Yeah, I love gossip.
Yeah.
So actually in Turkish we have a specific tense we use for gossip. So if you saw something happen, you would, you know, say it differently versus if you weren't there and you heard it secondhand, you would use a different tense. But yes, so this community is very tight-knit. There's kind of attached houses together. So you would be living in one house and there'd be a different family here, and their porches would be connected, but there's a dividing wall. So if you're talking about something over dinner, your neighbor will hear and then pass the word around. And people are always congregating at like the 3 places there are to congregate: the beach, the restaurant, the market. So there's lots of opportunities for gossip.
I love that. It's so great. Okay. So I know we wanted to talk about language. Do you feel like reading another passage, or do you just want to talk about it?
I can just talk about it. I can talk about language for a long time.
Okay, good. Yeah.
So in the book, other struggles, you know, with her Turkish, it's not that great, even though she's been coming there for a long time. And one thing that I wanted others to think about is not necessarily like, oh, oops, I miscommunicated something. They didn't understand me. I wanted X and they gave me Y. Like, that's one level of miscommunication. But I think that the kind of problems I wanted her to have is, was I able to establish the hierarchy, the social hierarchy I wanted by the words I chose and how I address someone? And this really kills her when she can't get it right. Like, did what I say or how I speak to you establish a kind of formal, respectful distance between us? Or did it seem like I am, you know, inferior to you or submissive? And I want to talk about that, about how much of, you know, your personality shows up in one language versus the other. I love thinking about how even if you're super fluent in a language, because of the conditions that you spoke that language in. So for example, I speak Turkish, but for most of my life, I only spoke Turkish with my family as a daughter. And so every time I spoke Turkish, I would always be coming from that place of power. And when I moved to Turkey and suddenly I had to like deal with a contractor, deal with my landlord, it wasn't that I didn't have the words, but I didn't know the way to say them to like establish the relationship that I wanted. And I love languages, so I just wanted to put as much as possible of that in there.
That's fascinating. And it also works on the layer of, I mean, this is just an extension of what you've said, but of really truly feeling like she belongs, like there are the other, the friends who visit, Denise, right, who like doesn't speak very well and like prides herself on being able to speak better than...
She's super judgmental.
Yes. Yes. I was saying it euphemistically. Yeah. But yeah, she really wants to like establish herself as someone who belongs there. Mm-hmm. And it's such a great facet of her character, and causes all sorts of interesting situations for her that you will all find out when you read the book. So let's see, I wanted to ask you 2 more questions and then we'll open it up to audience questions. And then the first is, I wanted to know what it has been like for you to go through the often like very solitary process of writing a book and then having it appear in the world and be read by people and be packaged in this beautiful way. And, you could talk about any, thoughts you have about that, or if anything has surprised you, or...
I'm so happy this week that it came out. Like, I'm so happy. I think that it hasn't been such a big shock. I'm seeing, hearing other people read it or hearing reviews come in. I think that the reason I started this book was I had a really big question myself. And I think I mentioned, like, these are like I feel really strongly committed to an idea when I have an idea for a book, because I'm like, I can't figure this out. Like, you go, be in this situation, like, figure this out for me. And then by the time I came to the end, I was like, oh, okay, I understand. I understand more about myself. I understand more about, like, these types of situations and questions that I've been obsessing over. So for me, it's like, I'm just so happy to have it, like, between the covers, like, this story of an exploration that I wanted to do. And it's been, I think that you can't really choose your readers. Like, books find their own readers unexpectedly. But it's been really lovely, especially to hear from, like, children of immigrants, to feel like it resonated with them. And yeah, that's really special for me, and everything else is, I hope people read it and take what they want from it. So
yeah, of course, yes, yeah. It's always sort of a shock for me when people read the book, like, even after many times, like, once it's out in the world, I'm like, oh no. So I'm glad that it's been a happy week for you in that area.
I think it's always, I've kind of been like, when they quote the book somewhere, they're like, I love this line. I'm like, oh, you do?
Yes.
Like, I wrote that. I made it up. Yeah. Oh, you know what was actually very, very jarring for me was when I got my contract. Because I had, I just made it up. Like, I just wrote it. And then there was, like, a very official looking document about, like, with the plot summary. And I was like, you guys, this was my imagination. Like, there's no need to be all, like, serious about it. So.
Yes, definitely the place where art and business collide in a very fascinating way. Okay, and then my last question before all of you ask yours is, what is next for you? And so this could either be, like, if you're working on something new or have an idea, or it could be just where you see your writing career going from here, from your debut.
Yeah, I want to write another novel, so I've been working on one for the last 1.5 to 2 years, because I really wanted to have something that I was involved in when this came out, so I wouldn't be, like, fully concentrating on how Holiday Country is doing. And the idea I have what I'm doing right now is just writing a story that goes here. Oh yeah, that didn't work. And then writing a similar story that goes there. That didn't work. So just, like, hundreds of pages again that I'm gonna have to reread. But I really want to take place in Europe, and which right now all my kind of versions do. And I really want it to be about an exploration of power and how people take paths trying to gain power over others. But I might change my mind. So.
Okay, we won't hold you to it. All right, thank you so much. And who has questions?
Go ahead.
Hi. I'm curious what informed your choice to have met and marry a non-Turkish person. I'm guessing from context clues that Matt married an American and didn't get married in Turkey and then immigrate as a family. So I don't know if that was intentional or if there's a meaning behind that.
Yeah, so I wanted to, in this story, what happens is that, so the grandmother character, as I mentioned, is, like, very domineering, kind of makes all these decisions for her daughter. And then then she, does this act of rebellion. She goes to Paris and she meets this American man. So it's all in this mindset of, like, I'm going to make my own decisions. I'm just going to do something that, my grandmother would definitely not approve of. So I wanted to take that to the extreme versus if she were to marry, this Turkish man and then be like, oh, and suddenly have it come up that they wanted to move to America together. Yeah, go ahead.
So this is kind of about the creative process, but I can't imagine what it's like to work on something for maybe 4 or 5 years and then reach the point where you realize, like, it's just not working or I have to start over. So could you just walk us through your headspace? Like, how did you reach that decision? Was it hard or did it feel cathartic? Like, what was that like?
I must have blocked it out. But I made, when I first started, I started in 2013 to, like, really take it seriously that I was going to write a novel, I was going to finish it. I made 2 promises to myself, and I really recommend this to anyone who's taking on, like, a very long-term creative project. I promised myself that I wouldn't give up no matter what, because if every day you have to recommit, that's just so draining. That's so draining. You say, like, oh no, I decided on that day that I wouldn't give up, so we're not going to think about this anymore. And then separately, the second decision was that I would be okay if people thought that I was silly or a fool or bad at writing, because I knew I would have those fears. Because you write a draft, it's not good at all, but you take it as far as you can take it, and at a certain point you have to give it to someone. You're like, oh God, this person's going to be like, you have a degree in writing, like, and this is what you wrote, like, this is and so I promised myself, like, that fear, like, I'm just going to be okay with it. They're going to think that I'm going to be okay with it. And so, people ask you, like, oh, you're working on a book, when can I read it? And you're like, well, I've been working on it for 5 years, but now I'm rewriting it, so maybe 5 more. It was, I felt more comfortable saying that. But yeah, I mean, I just knew that I would keep going. And then it happened, so yay. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
When you would get feedback from people on manuscripts, how did you decide which feedback to take and which to discard?
So at first, I didn't want to take any of it. At first, it was very, I gave freely, and then they would say things like, oh God, that's so much work, and I would think about, like, well, this person is used to reading different types of books, so maybe I shouldn't. But I think that if several people said the same thing, so that means you need a few people that you're going to force to read your drafts, then I had to take it seriously. And also, if people didn't finish reading, I would ask, like, oh, where did you stop? Where did it get boring? And then, early on, a lot of people just didn't want to read it. So I was like, okay, this is a sign. So it's not even, like, specific feedback. And then, when you have editors and agents, you're like, oh, yeah, everything they say is right. So. Yes?
I know you moved to Turkey a few years ago to accomplish that dream. How did that change your, finishing up the book and how you thought about the themes of the book?
So I was working in London in corporate in 2019, and then I was very unhappy, and I was only staying for my manager. And then my manager was moving teams, so I just quit. I moved to Turkey. And so that was kind of the end of my corporate life. And what actually ended up happening was I placed so much pressure on myself to write a better book because I was fully focusing on it. So there was that. But thankfully it was more in the editing phase. So it was a little nicer to just go to cafes and work on it and just be okay kind of taking as much time as I needed. And then in terms of being in Turkey and writing a book about Turkey, so there's parts that take place in Istanbul, but mostly it is about Ayvalık. And I think that being apart from the place where I write is always better when I'm creating. And because I think if I'm in the city where that I'm writing about, I just think oh, I have to get this exactly right. How many islands were there? Does this street cross this street? But then being kind of apart from it, when I was, doing the initial drafting, I could just think about how it felt and what I remember things looking like. So in general, I don't like being in the place that I'm writing about. And then also, quitting your job to focus on writing is a lot of extra pressure. So don't do it at the beginning.
Question from our online audience.
Yeah.
What's the most surprising thing you've learned about yourself in the last 10 years of the writing process?
What a great question, and so introspective. I think that I think it's kind of hard to see yourself from the outside and to take on such a long project through very different phases of my life, and then to hear kind of my friends reach out to me after its publication and say oh, I remember 10 years ago when you were talking about this. I remember you never gave up, and just being so happy that I was persistent, because that's a character quality that I really value, and could be oh yes, I'm a very persistent person. This is true, everyone. So I think learning that about myself made me really happy.
That's such an important quality to have as a writer, too.
Yeah.
I have another one from an audience member. I imagine there's been a degree of fantasizing and anticipation about this moment of the release of your first book. How has the reality compared to your expectations?
So my book came out yesterday, so I had my first event yesterday in LA, and this is my second. Honestly, it's been so fun. I'm just having such a great time. It's so great to connect with readers and, my friends and my community. I think that honestly it's gone above and beyond, and it's so lovely when you do something and you realize your energy levels just go like immediately all the way up. I remember yesterday I was quite tired before the event, and I came and I was just like in a completely different mind space when it came to like talking about and sharing the book. So I would say that it has exceeded my expectations. That's wonderful. All right, is there a last question? Okay, go ahead.
First of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
What is your favorite character and favorite part of the story?
My favorite character is the grandmother because writing to me isn't necessarily fun. It's just incredibly, incredibly rewarding. But writing the grandmother, I just had a really good time. My favorite part is at the end, so I won't spoil it, but there's a scene, mother, daughter, and grandmother, near the end when things are really starting to unravel. It's a very tense point, and I actually I rewrote the ending kind of quite late. I don't remember if it was after I had found my agent or right before, but it's a scene that I really like. So yeah, again, the scenes with the three women together.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for coming. Congratulations again.